Well, hello everyone, this is Matt Gifford, aka ColdFusion Monkey, and I just wanted to run through a brief demo with you to show how easy it is to work and access with remote data from your ColdFusion server in Flash Builder 4. So in this particular example, I'm going to be accessing and calling this component, which is a very simple Hello World CFC. Inside this particular component we have three methods, one hello world, one hello person, and one get query that returns a hard-coded query. So to start off with, we're going to create our Flex project, and I'm just going to call this remote data. I'm going to accept the default location in this particular instance. I'm creating a web application for this example, and for the application server type I am going to be using the ColdFusion Flash Remoting. So we'll click Next. In the next panel you'll need to set up the details for your server location. As we're working and developing on our local system, I've entered in the details for my local ColdFusion 9 installation. If I just uncheck that, so I'm passing in the path to the root folder, passing in the path to the actual web root folder for the web server, and to validate the configuration just to make sure that's working. In this particular instance I've got a folder that already exists under that name because I've tested this project previously. If you're setting up a new project this issue won't arise, but this is okay to be overwritten. So we're going to overwrite that, so click Next. I'm just going to accept the default information that's passed out there for us again. And Flash Builder 4 is now building up our project for us. And here we have our remote data.mxml, which is our core mxml file that will be the basis for all of our Flash development. So to start off with, I want to actually provide the details for our remote object. Thanks to Code Insight, it's incredibly easy to do. So it's an s:\remote object. We'll start off that tag. The ID tag can be anything you want. In this particular example I'm using remote svc. The destination, which relates to a particular ID in a config file on your ColdFusion server. This is set as ColdFusion. And the endpoint relates to your web server and the Flex gateway. So in this particular instance we're working on the local host, port 8500, and it's Flex to gateway. So that's our endpoint, that's how the Flash Builder is going to communicate with the Flex gateway on the ColdFusion server installation. And the source attribute is the path to the CFC that we want to handle. In this particular example, the Hello World CFC is actually within, it's directly on the ColdFusion root, so we don't need to specify any dot notation paths. So accessing the method, again it's s:\method, and we're going to call a name for the query. This can be absolutely anything you like, but obviously make it memorable, make it something of use to you. And in this particular example I'm using hello person because I'm going to be calling the hello person method within the CSC. The methods are going to need result handlers to handle what's going to be occurring once the information has been brought back. You can also specify your fault handlers as well. But in this particular example it's so easy, I'm not going to do that. So we're going to specify a second method here, which is hello world. And I'm actually going to run the same result handler. So there we go. So we've got our two methods, hello person and hello world, which equate to the hello person and hello world within the CFC. We've closed off our remote object tag, so that's absolutely fantastic. However, this is a non-visual element, and Flash Builder very kindly reminds us that non-visual elements should be placed within the FX declarations tag. I next need to set up some basic script actions so my application knows how to handle the information that's being pulled back. I need to import a few libraries first. First is the RPC events library, which is going to handle our result event. And I'm just going to bring in one of the controls, which is the alert, so we can get a nice, groovy, awesome alert box popping up for us. So now we actually need to write the hello result function that's going to handle our return data. Here we are, hello results. We don't need to worry about the return type in this particular instance. Now it is working as an event handler, so we need to actually specify the event handler within the parameters, because we're sending through the event there, and the function needs to know that it is of type result event. And all we're doing, whatever data is brought back, we're going to run a quick alert show on the event result, and we're actually going to convert that to a string. And we'll nicely tidy that up there. Okay, so we have our remote objects in place, we have our script in place, we just need our UI components. So we're going to specify text input, and I'm going to call this one, give it the ID of name input. I'm then going to add two buttons, because we're running two separate methods, so I want one button for each method. This label is going to be question, and here we set up the click handlers for the buttons which will relate and call our remote objects. So if we look at the remote object ID, which was remote service, we need to specify that first within the click handler so it knows that we are calling that remote object. Then we're using the dot, and we are now going to call the hello person method, which was within the remote service. If we actually go through to the hello person method within the component, you can see it does require one particular argument, which is the name, and we need to pass that value through. That is why we set up the name input text inputs UI there. So we're actually going to send through the value of that text box by calling the ID .text to get the text parameter. Just setting up my second button now, and this particular one is a statement, and again this one has a click handler which calls the remote service, and in this instance we are calling the hello world method. This hello world method doesn't actually have any arguments being sent into it, so we don't need to send anything through. Now what I will do, I'll quickly jump over into design view, because all of those UI elements are going to be bundled together just like that. So I'm going to separate those out a little bit, just make it a little bit more user friendly. So I've got the question next to the input box, and I've got the statement there. And fantastically, Flash Builder has added in the X and Y coordinates for me, which is absolutely superb. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to run this. I'm going to run it as a test web application. Here we go, so it's loaded up the details for me. If I click the statement button, remember that is going to call the hello world function, and it's pulled back monkey love is good love, which is absolutely true. And if we actually jump over to the hello world, you can see that is the string that's being returned, so we know that's working. Now it's time for the question. Now remember, this had a parameter that was going through. We can actually send through an argument to this of name. So if I send through my name and add the question, let's go, hey Matt, did you know that monkey love is good love? Indeed it is. So the Matt is the value that we've actually sent through from the text input box, as you can see, and by sending it through to the ColdFusion component and to the particular hello person method, we're receiving the argument, inserting it into the return string, and sending that data straight back out again. Now one quick example I wanted to show in this instance was how Flash Builder handles returned query objects, query objects that have been sent through from the ColdFusion components. And to do that, we are going to be calling this particular query the getQuery function within the Hello World CFC. So we already have our remote object instance set up. I'm going to need to add a few more details in here. First thing I want to do is actually create a bindable private array, which is an array collection, and that is going to handle our return query data. Basically all other return types sent through from ColdFusion remote objects will translate to their equivalents within Flash Builder and or Flex, with the exception of query objects, as Flash Builder and Flex do not have queries. So it basically translates those and casts those into an array collection. So it's a collection of array objects. So we'll set up our array collection object, which is what our query will be translated into. What I do want to do next is quickly add in a nice UI element. I'm going to pick a data grid. And as you can see from the bottom here, I'm just grabbing it from the components list. I'm doing a drag and drop. And there we go. I'm going to add in the data provider for this. So the attribute data provider, and the data provider is going to be the AC Beatles array collection, which we've seen up there. I don't actually want the rest of this information now because the columns are null and void. It's going to be populated from the return query object that we have sent back to us. I next need to add the method which is going to call that particular function within the Hello World CSC, and I'm going to give that a name of getQuery. And the result handler for this particular remote object call is query result, and again we're sending through the event. Okay, so we have the call through. What we're now going to do is set up the result event function. So there we have it. So we now have our query result function, which is expecting the result event information. And from that return data, we're going to be casting the query as an array collection into the AC Beatles variable, which would set up here. And that is instantly going to populate the data provider for the data grid. But we still actually need to call that particular function into existence. And the way we're going to do that we're actually going to add that one to a creation complete, and we're going to be calling remote service .getQuery. So as soon as the application is loaded and everything's built and ready to go, it's going to instantly run the remote service, the getQuery, which is going to call our Hello World CFC. It's going to bring back this query object. It's then going to cast that query object as an array collection and populate the data grid with the information returned. So let's see if we can get that up and running. There we go. So it's instantly done it. As soon as the information's been pulled back, it's populated the data grid for us. And that is how easy it is to obtain remote data from your ColdFusion components and incorporate them into your Flex projects.